is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Pay heed all who enter, and beware this podcast. That's right, this is the Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer alongside Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible. Member FDIC, a special post-4th of July edition of Pay Heed. Normally we'd be doing these Jayhawk Rewind shows every week, but with the 4th of July weekend, we decided we were just coming here on a Monday, if you're earlier in the week, if you're listening, and recorded here for the Jayhawk Rewind. So very exciting times. We got Big 12 Media Days coming up. We're going to be breaking down that later on this week, so be sure to keep your eye on the KCSN feed for an episode of us talking post Big 12 Media Days, as KU, they are set to be going on Wednesday morning as we record here on this Monday. So be sure to keep an eye out for that, and be sure to keep locked in on the KCSNU feed on YouTube, and also like, subscribe, comment, share your thoughts, tell us what you think, use a 5-star rating and review, and more. On today's episode, we're going to be continuing with our Jayhawk Rewind series, and Kansas, we are moving into week 8, I believe, for KU, as they go down to Stillwater. Kansas 5-1, pardon me, 5-1 as they headed down to Stillwater with the one loss against Texas. They had absolutely destroyed UCF the week before. And Kevin, thoughts going into this game? First off, one thing I just wanted to mention is this is a very interesting game because I think at the start of the season, you would have said, nah, you could probably write off that trip to Stillwater as a loss. Oklahoma State's pretty good, so on and so forth. And then Oklahoma State is terrible to start the year, and you're thinking, wait a minute, we continue go and win in Stillwater? And then it seems like Oklahoma State figured things out with their game against K-State they had the week before. So I don't know. Where were you at heading into this game for KU?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I was not one of the people who bought into Oklahoma State heading into the season because they had, the really awful end of the season, in 2022. Then you have 8 bajillion guys transfer out, including your starting quarterback and Spencer Sanders. They brought guys in, but I didn't necessarily think, hey, it wasn't necessarily like for like. I felt like maybe they lost more than they brought in. And so when Oklahoma State struggled to start off the year, I'm not saying I saw them getting blown out by South Alabama like it wound up happening, but a lot of people before the season started looked at Oklahoma State's schedule and the fact that they missed Texas and said, hey, this is a team that has a chance to reach the Big 12 title game. I kind of looked at it as, I don't know that they're good enough to reach the Big 12 title game with all of those things. It looked like I was maybe on the right track to start. Then, Oklahoma State has that great game against K-State. They figured out they had this guy named Ollie Gordon on their team. Who knew? Yeah. And started giving him the ball, and all of a sudden great things happened. There was something to be said. Mike Gundy talked about at Big 12 Media Days. One of the things that he had said was he had felt like a lot of the guys that they had lost, the attitude in the locker room was back where they wanted it to be. The chemistry was where they wanted it to be. And I think with Oklahoma State in general, and especially that K-State game, you started to see that Oklahoma State was maybe a little bit more than the sum of its pieces at that point, and was starting to get better. The other thing that I thought was really interesting, Nick, was the previous year, Jason Bean had played against Oklahoma State, and that was the one game that Kansas won with Jason Bean as its starting quarterback. They won that game to achieve bowl eligibility. You're in a similar situation where you can achieve bowl eligibility here. Jason Bean is your quarterback. But remember in that game that Devin Neal went absolutely nuts. He carried the ball 32 times for 224 yards, had a touchdown, also had 6 catches for 110 yards, so went over the 100-yard mark as a receiver. And a lot of people don't realize this, but at the end of the season, when the All Big 12 voting came out, Devin Neal had a vote for Offensive Player of the Year. And while the coaches' votes are not made public, I always kind of felt like Mike Gundy had logged that vote for Devin Neal after the performance that he had in that game. And so one of the things that I thought was going to be interesting in this game was I felt like Oklahoma State was going to try and make Jason Bean beat them, and they were going to do everything they could to make sure that Devin Neal didn't have a Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year type performance again.
Oh, yeah. You look at the game against UCF, and Jason Bean didn't hardly have to do anything, and Kansas won.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my thought is like, okay, great job. You took down UCF at home and Jason Bean didn't have to do much, but I felt that if KU was going to win a game at Oklahoma State, if KU was going to win a game against Oklahoma, which is coming up, Jason Bean is going to have to make some plays, right? You're not going to win a game with Jason Bean game managing against some of these tougher opponents. And that's not knocking against UCF. It's just how the game played out. But I felt pretty strongly that, okay, the recipe for winning against UCF worked, but I don't think it's a recipe that's going to win every single week. Jason Bean will have to make some plays. And that was my thought coming into this game for KU against Oklahoma State is, okay, let's see Jason Bean make something happen. Because to your point, I think for Oklahoma State it was, hey, if we can shut down the run and see what Jason Bean can do, right? I mean, he's been prone to make mistakes, and so let's force the ball in his hands. Let's not let Devin Neal run for 300 yards on us, and let's maintain a wraps on Daniel Highshaw as well and go from there. And honestly, that's exactly what happened in the game, right? Oklahoma State really did shut down the KU run game as well. So, yeah, I don't know. I can't say I was confident going into this game. I actually made the trip down to Stillwater for this one. It was my first time being in Stillwater. Stillwater's pretty cool. I'm fine with Stillwater. Hopefully no OU fans listening and being like, oh, Stillwater sucks. Sorry. Well, first of all, OU fans, your opinion is irrelevant because you're not in this conference anymore. So get out of this podcast if you're an OU fan. Turn it off. You don't deserve to be listening to this. But anyways, let's get into the game here then. So KU going down to Stillwater to take on Oklahoma State. And like we said, this was an interesting game because of the fact that Oklahoma State had been really wishy-washy. Mike Gundy had been rolling out 3 different quarterbacks. Finally, they seem to have settled on Alan Bowman, and they also figured out they had Ollie Gordon, like you mentioned as well.
Yep.
And Kevin, let's be honest. The first 6 minutes of this game, really 6 minutes or so of this game, was just an unmitigated disaster. Just a complete train wreck. It could not have gone.
It was a 2022 game, right? There was sort of a running joke in 2022 that KU's games didn't start until they were down 2 touchdowns because they happened to not start super well in a lot of contests and kind of woke up after that. But this year, that hadn't really been the case up until this point. And like you said, you could not have asked for a worse start if you were KU, could not have asked for a better start if you were Oklahoma State.
Yeah, it was pretty much a disaster. Oklahoma State goes down and they get the ball first. They go down and score a touchdown within 2 minutes. Alan Bowman makes a couple of nice passes. Ollie Gordon had a 50-yard catch and run on the first drive. They went down and scored. KU's opening drive, pretty much nothing happens. They got a first down on a pass from Jason Bean to Lawrence Arnold, but then not really much else. They tried to run Devin Neal, and it was not working early. Oklahoma State gets the ball back, and in 3 minutes, they go down and score again pretty easily, kind of chunking their way down the field. They had another big pass to Ollie Gordon from Alan Bowman, and they get a 20-yard touchdown pass to Brennan Presley. And literally with, still 9 minutes left or 8 minutes left in the first quarter, KU is down 14-0, and you're immediately starting to think of some of the old KU Oklahoma State games. And when I say old, I mean over the last decade plus, where it's 55-3, 70-28, 48-10, 48-17. Just really, really bad news. And again, at this point, I do want to make something clear because, looking back at this now, it's easy to say, well, Jason Bean, he's going to do his thing, right? That wasn't the case in the moment, right? Jason Bean had not really proven, I don't think yet at this point, that he could be somebody that could be that, X factor type player that could bring KU back into a game. He had proven that he could make X factor plays. He had proven that he could sort of game manage KU to wins, but we hadn't really seen him kind of put the team on his shoulders and get them back into a game.
Yeah, the question was, when it came time to make a play, would he make the play? You weren't thinking about him as, hey, Jason Bean's going to go out and throw for 300 yards. You weren't thinking about, hey, this is an advantage that KU has, is they've got a really good quarterback. It was when KU inevitably gets into 3rd and 6, is Jason Bean going to be able to make the play to pick up the first down? And, it's so funny looking at these with the benefit of hindsight. Jason Bean, and we're going to talk about this each week, he came such a long way, even from where we're at now, and we're past the midpoint of the season. He came a long way from where he's at this point to where he was at the end of the year. But as of right now, Jason Bean was still, okay, he's the no doubt backup. opposing fans hadn't started in on the, Jason Bean's just as good as Jalen Daniels, thing that you see on Twitter occasionally now. Jason Bean was an unproven commodity. And so you found yourself in a weird situation in that I think when KU fell down by multiple scores and you had Jalen Daniels the previous year, you really felt confident, like, well, it's okay, they're going to respond. This team doesn't really have any quit to them. You're all of a sudden in a spot where you're barely even into this game, and you're saying Kansas needs a response, and Jason Bean needs a response, and they need to do something here for the offensive confidence, and Nick, a response is what they got. Yeah,
for sure. We'll get into that as KU down 14-0 at this point in the game, but we do have to take a break here. Before we do that, we'll tell you about our friends at Home Field Apparel, sponsoring us here on the Payheed podcast. Check out Home Field Apparel. You can also use the promo code PAYHEED24 for 15% off your first order. That's Payheed, Payheed. I'm assuming you can spell. I don't know. But listen, I struggle with spelling, so it's fair.
If you're watching on YouTube, it's in big letters.
That's true. Yes, if you are a YouTube watcher, you literally can't screw it up. It is in giant letters across the front there. So Payheed24 for 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com. They've got incredible KU gear. I mentioned it last week. I had a guy stop me on the street, ask me about my Home Field Apparel shirt. I told him, hey, it's Home Field Apparel. So, it's all over the place right now, and people are noticing. It's great gear. So check that out over at homefieldapparel.com. More of the Jayhawk Rewind coming up on the other side.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
This is the Payheed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer with Kevin Flaherty. Be sure to keep your eye out on the KCSN feed on YouTube and on your podcast feed as well from Payheed, as we're going to be talking Big 12 Media Days for KU, which KU will be taking to the podium coming up on Wednesday. So be on the lookout for our reactions and analysis and breakdown of everything for KU at the Big 12 Media Days in Las Vegas. My initial analysis, Kevin, is that it is going to be hot as hell in Las Vegas. So they're going to be dealing with 120-degree temperatures. That sucks. So that's my Big 12 Media Days analysis for right now. We'll leave it at that. So be sure to keep an eye out later this week for more of our thoughts on that. Right now we're doing our Jayhawk Rewind series, going through every game from the 2023 season, getting you ready for 2024, as we're at this point, I think, less than 8 weeks away now, almost 7 weeks away from the start of the season, as Kansas will be taking on Lindenwood in late August. So we got to get through the rest of this 2023 season. Right now we're on KU and Oklahoma State. KU comes into this game at 5-1, and as we talked just before the break, an atrocious start for KU. They're down 14-0 pretty quickly in this game against Oklahoma State. You're left scratching your head thinking, what is the response going to be? And sure enough, KU does flip the switch and they get things going. Down 14-0, they get the ball back and they go straight down the field for a touchdown. It's capped off by a long pass from Jason Bean to Trevor Wilson, 47 yards. And then there was a bit of drama, though, on the extra point. Listen, this is going to become an extra point podcast here, I think, on this episode. We're going to be talking a lot about extra points. So buckle up for that. And it starts here. KU's down 14-6 after the touchdown pass from Jason Bean and Trevor Wilson. And the initial point after attempt gets blocked, but Oklahoma State was offside. So Kansas gets the second try, and they do make it. So it is 14-7 now.
Wait, hold up. Oklahoma State was offside, and it was called?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
It was called in this instance?
Yeah. It was an offside that was called, which we will get into, an offside that was not called also later on in the show. But this one was called, and it helped KU gain a point here as the initial extra point was blocked. But yeah, a great connection here from Jason Bean to Trevor Wilson. That's also not the first time we'll talk about that in this show as well. KU was down 14-7. But now really, I think, Kevin, at this point, the question was, great, the offense has started to get going, but can the defense do anything? Because Oklahoma State had 2 touchdown drives that each took less than 3 minutes, basically. So the question was, could they bow up here, basically, and keep Oklahoma State from getting in the end zone?
Yeah, and you didn't love the matchups, I feel like, with KU's defense against Oklahoma State's offense, because you felt like Oklahoma State could run the ball with Ollie Gordon. Oklahoma State could throw the ball to Ollie Gordon, as they would quite a bit over the course of this game. But also, dynamic receivers like Rashad Owens, Brennan Presley, obviously. You just didn't know if KU had enough ways to slow down that offense. And I'll be honest, before we even get to that, one of the big plays of that drive wound up being a 3rd and 1 where Jason Bean found Jared Casey. And if that connection hadn't happened and Kansas had to punt that ball away, this game could have gotten out of hand. The offense scored. The defense bowed up. I believe Lance Leipold likes to call that complimentary football. And Kansas winds up, they get Oklahoma State, into a situation where, Oklahoma State drives down. It looks like they're going to get, they're going to potentially go for another touchdown. They have a 1st and 10 on the 14. They stuff Ollie Gordon for a 2-yard gain. Austin Booker makes the play. Then, there's a short pass that I think Jamie Brown maybe makes the tackle on. Then you get an incomplete pass. Oklahoma State does get some points on the board with a field goal, but you felt pretty good at that point because you were able to hold them to a field goal when they were able to get the ball, inside the red zone like that.
Yeah, this was this made you flash back to the Texas game.
Sure.
Where Oklahoma State was able to get up and down the field pretty easily for the most part, but Kansas was able to find ways to stop them in the red zone. And this was the first of a couple of different times where Kansas was able to keep Oklahoma State out of the end zone. So at that point, you're looking at a 17-7 game. Kansas is able to respond again with another nice touchdown drive, 9 plays, 75 yards that goes into the second quarter. A couple of nice passes to Mason Fairchild from Jason Bean, including a 3rd down and long, a 3rd and 9 that extended the drive when they were in their own territory. And then again, on this touchdown, this was one where Oklahoma State evidently just forgot about Mason Fairchild. They only had 10 guys on the field. I don't know what happened. Mason Fairchild gets wide open and he goes and scores. Kansas makes it 17-13. And this is again where the extra point discussion is going to come in, because on this drive, Oklahoma State or Kansas, they believe it was blocked again. The extra point was blocked again.
There was a false start first, so
like it's so
at 20 yards, and then it was blocked. Yeah, so special teams just really not having the and specifically extra point, not really having the best day for Kansas to start this one off.
Yeah, they actually called Seth Keller. It was Seth Keller who was called for the false start. The kicker called for the false start on the extra point. He tried to go early, I guess, and then the follow-up attempt gets blocked. So instead of 17-14, you're looking at 17-13 at this point. And then Kansas, they finally get a stop. They force a 3-and-out. They force 3-and-out against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State they had a false start that kind of pushed them back, and it ended up being a 3rd and long, and they sack Alan Bowman for a punt. So 17-13, Kansas getting the ball back. You're feeling a lot better. And then this is where you see maybe Jason Bean's best ability, which is he can make electricity happen with the deep ball. And he is a guy that has been proven that he is not afraid to throw the ball deep down the field, right? If he sees a chance, he will take it. And he takes it here, and it results in another touchdown for Kansas in just 2 plays. They go down and score again to make it 19-17. This one was another one where Mason Fairchild, I think, ended up being left wide open again on a little play-action play for 44 yards, and it's 19-17. Kansas then goes for 2, and they don't get it. So now it's still 19-17. Very bizarre score, but you're up 2, I guess.
Yeah, and it was kind of funny because just 2 gigantic busts by Oklahoma State in coverage, and we talked about before the game how you were thinking, they aren't going to let Devin Neal beat them. Well, at this point, they probably were looking at it and saying, well, okay, let's not let Devin Neal beat us, but maybe also don't let the tight end, run by himself 20 yards downfield. And Jason Bean had been picking up confidence, in that first touch, or I think it was the second touchdown drive. He had he had 2 3rd and long conversions. One was the 3rd and 9 to Mason Fairchild. I think they converted like a 3rd and 13 to Lawrence Arnold. Then you have the long pass to Mason Fairchild again for a touchdown. And all of a sudden, he's got, 3 long touchdown passes when you add in the the Trevor Wilson one as well. And Kansas's offense is absolutely cooking. You figured there would be some sort of adjustment in here somewhere, but you didn't know how it would come exactly. Would the running game start to open up because Oklahoma State had to pull guys off? Would it just be the sort of thing where they're just like, hey, stop busting in the secondary so badly, or what the deal was? But all of a sudden, you had the brutal start like you talked about. And yet Kansas leads 19-17 in Stillwater, and the Jayhawks would continue to outplay Oklahoma State.
Yeah, you talk about a roller coaster of emotions. I mean, down 14-0 in basically 6 minutes to now all of a sudden Jason Bean sort of pulling you all the way back with some great plays. And also, like you said, I mean, Oklahoma State was maybe a little too committed to stopping Devin Neal and not committed to anything else. And Kansas was capitalizing on that, right? Like Andy Kolecki, we know the type of play caller that he is. If he recognizes, hey, these boys are selling out to stop Devin Neal, he's going to be able to capitalize on that. And that's kind of what was happening at this point, right? These weren't necessarily difficult plays for Jason Bean. You know, I kind of touched on at the top of the show of, well, I think Jason Bean's going to have to make some plays. Well, these weren't difficult plays to make. I mean, hell, I could have made the touchdown pass to Mason Fairchild, you know, so these weren't difficult plays to make, but he was making them at least, which is obviously significant and enough as it is. So at this point, you're looking at 36 points. 36 points scored, and there's still 10 minutes left in the second quarter. And this is where you get sort of the only really lull in the action of the game, where both Oklahoma State and KU trade 3 and outs. And then Oklahoma State gets the ball back, and they go on a drive a little bit, but they end up stalling out near midfield. They're forced to punt again. Kansas then gets the ball back inside their own 20. They don't really do much with it. They're forced to punt. It's not a great punt, by the way, from Damon Greaves. Again, really, special teams was kind of the theme of this game for KU, and not in a positive way. So at this point, you're still looking at 4 minutes left in the second quarter after kind of the lull of the offense. And Oklahoma State, they strike it quickly again on 2 plays. They get to Ollie Gordon springing open on a 42-yard run. And Ollie Gordon really was certainly the player of the game, I think, for Oklahoma State. 170 total yards rushing he finished up with, and they gave him the ball 29 times. And he also had 6 receptions as well. So 35 touches for Ollie Gordon in the game to go along with 2 touchdowns. And here, this also kind of gave me flashbacks to the Texas game where, Jonathan Brooks eventually broke one. And here, Ollie Gordon eventually breaks one, and that puts Oklahoma State back in front to make it 24-19. So at this point, the offense is kind of stalled out for Kansas. You wonder if they have a chance to sort of get things going again, but you're down 5 towards the end of the first half. You'd like to, but this is a situation where at this point, if you're Kansas, you're going to get the ball back to start the second half. Oklahoma State got the ball first. So if you can find a way to score, to respond here towards the end of the first half, you can hopefully carry that into the second half as well.
Yeah, and, it's funny you talk about how much Ollie Gordon got the ball. Big part of that lull was Ollie Gordon wasn't getting the ball as much. The 3 and out that they got, they didn't give the ball to Ollie Gordon, and then the next drive, they gave it to him twice. He got 24 yards on those 2 plays, and he didn't touch the ball again, although they did try, I think, 1 pass to him after that. And so, that was kind of the lull for them. The next drive, Ollie Gordon takes it to the house. And I'm not saying KU's teetering at this point because it's a 1-score game, but like you said, you do have a chance to respond and get some momentum. And here's the Jason Bean kind of play of the game, I feel like, where you wind up with a 3rd and 4 and a minute 15 or a minute 6, I guess. No, it was a minute 15 left. And you have a 3rd and 4. Jason Bean rolls out and has this amazing, throw to Quentin Skinner, who takes it 49 yards to the house. It wasn't a bust. It wasn't, as easy as the other plays had been. This was a play that Jason Bean and Quentin Skinner really went out and made, and Kansas takes the lead back.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head. To me, this was really the play of the game for Jason Bean. Because of the significance of the situation, the timing of it. Kansas was not in field goal range, right? So it's 3rd and 4, and if you don't convert, you're probably punting, unless Lance Leipold would have wanted to roll the dice, I guess, maybe that late in the half. But yeah, Jason Bean, something else that's important to point out here is he rolls to his left. This is a play rolling to his left, and he throws an absolute laser to Quentin Skinner, who makes a great catch on the sideline, and then does an excellent job of also staying in bounds as well to go down for a touchdown. And Quentin Skinner, I think one of the things about him that is maybe underrated is his body control, right? I'm sure we'll get to it. He had Nessie at a SportsCenter top 10 play against Iowa State that we'll talk about later on in the season. He's just got incredible body control, and that is probably the most underrated thing about him, right? I mean, I think a lot of people have always looked at Quentin Skinner as sort of this tall, lanky burner type where you just throw it deep to him. But he really showed over the course of 2023 he can expand his game in a lot of different ways, and this was an example of a great catch by him, great body control, and then obviously, of course, the great speed to outrun the defense for a touchdown.
Yeah, and another example that we've talked about where you can't really focus on one guy in that receiving core because, you try and shade your coverage one way and somebody else is going to make a play. And it's not always going to be the same guy. And I think that's one of the things that's exciting looking forward into 2024 is these receivers have seen a lot of games together. And there's been a lot of production. And you talk about the third down earlier that they picked up with a big pass to L.J. Arnold. Obviously, you don't need to talk about all the big plays that Luke Grimm has made. This was just the first that Quentin Skinner would make in this game, and he would go on to have a good game. But like you said, you really have to focus on the body control and the hands by Quentin Skinner as much as anything because, yes, he's 6'5". Yes, he's one of the fastest guys on the team. But you look at it, and over the last 2 years, you look into 2022 as well, with I think he had a catch against TCU, right? And he had a few other ones that year. He may have put up a full SportsCenter, like top 10 worth of catches over the course of his career. He's got, tremendous, I guess, with NCAA football coming out here in another, week or two.
Oh, yeah. His spectacular catch rating has got
spectacular catch rating should be very high.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, his spectacular catch rating should be very high. And so, he goes down and scores. Kansas now back in front, 25-24. And then something kind of weird happens, a play that I think would maybe make you want to rip your hair out in some circumstances. It kind of was fine, though, I think, in the grand scheme of things. Kansas had 3 timeouts left. There's a minute left in the first half. You're up 1, and they try to go for 2 again. They ultimately are forced to burn a timeout on the 2-point conversion play to sort of rethink it. They come back out, and they don't get it. They get stopped. Jason Bean rolls out, throws it away. So, again, another failure. I mean, let me ask you this, Kevin, I guess. Do you consider 2-point conversions to be special teams? Do you consider that to be like a special teams type play? Would you categorize that in special teams?
It's a funny question. I would probably consider that special teams, but I get that it's a situational offensive play.
Sure.
It's basically a goal line play, but at the same time, I do think that since it is a special teams play or whatever, and you do practice those separately, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
When you go into a game, and one of the things that when Kansas lost to Arkansas with the 2-point conversion going awry, one of the things that Andy Kotelnicki had said was, we had to run like 8 billion 2-point conversion before that. We ran out of plays. We didn't have a whole lot of stuff left. And so, yeah, I do think that I would probably call that still special teams, even though it is your starting offense in a situational offensive play. I think I'd still call that special teams. But, yeah, I mean, just leaving points on the board in extra point situations, all of a sudden, you've left a field goal up there in terms of, hey, if you had just made the extra point 3 straight times, when you had yours blocked, when you had the 2-point conversions fail, you're 3 points to the good. And, that would wind up being big later on.
Yeah, so really just an absolute mind-bending first half, really. Kansas stops Oklahoma State. They go into half. It's 25-24. Jason Bean had 274 yards and 4 touchdowns at the half. And he showed really no signs of slowing down. So really a bizarre first half, right? I mean, imagine if you're somebody on your couch watching this game, Oklahoma State is up 14-0, you're like, okay, I'm flipping over to a different game. You flip back, and it's 25-24 at half, and you're like, what is happening?
It was probably Bean's best passing game to that point. Well, I mean, that part's obvious, but the other one that would be a consideration would be the half he played the second half against TCU. And that one was a little bit different in that, I'm not sure TCU busted to the extent that Oklahoma State did a couple times. And KU, it felt like made SportsCenter catch after SportsCenter catch in that game. And so you felt in some cases, I don't want to say like he was being bailed out in that game, but you felt a lot more like, hey, the receivers are really making this thing happen. You had to come out of that Oklahoma State first half with regard to Jason Bean. I mean, one, you're kind of like, who is this guy? But the other part of it is just not that you're ever going to expect him to throw for 270 yards and a half again, but if he can just be a consistent guy who's throwing for 270 yards in a game, if he can make the plays that are available to him, I think you felt like Kansas's level just went up at that point.
Yeah, and he continued to do that to start the second half as well. KU gets the ball to start the second half. They're up 1. And listen, they needed to rely on Jason Bean to convert 2 third downs on a pass to Trevor Wilson on a 3rd and 3. And then later in the drive, he had another pass to Trevor Wilson as well for a first down. So 2 third down conversions for KU on their opening drive of the second half. And then again, Quinn Skinner, just making another phenomenal play on a pass from Jason Bean. And then all of a sudden, Kansas has extended their lead. And now you're feeling a lot better. You've capitalized off of your touchdown to end the first half, and then another touchdown to start the second half. And you're up 32-24 at this point. And now the only question becomes, okay, is KU going to need to win this game like 70-63? Or what's the math here to try to win this one?
Yeah, and you look at it, and it's crazy to think about now. I don't feel like we have to say spoilers at this point because the game happened a year ago. But at the same time, KU wasn't going to score again. And I think that's one of the most shocking parts about this is when you go back and look at it, you say, well, my gosh, what more could the offense have done? They scored 32 points. Jason Bean throws for 80 bajillion yards and 5 touchdowns?
Yep.
And you say, oh, that's amazing. But I think it really added up the fact that Kansas wasn't able to score over the final 26 minutes of this game. Oklahoma State didn't really go off over that period, but it left the door open. And if Kansas was able to get another touchdown or two in there, this game, very likely would have turned out differently, but it didn't. And when you add in that they didn't score again, the 3 points that they've already, left off basically where they should have 35 points right now, that's a tough situation. And,
oh yeah,
Oklahoma State does wind up responding in terms of driving down the field. Kansas, in true Texas fashion, again, holds and allows a field goal. And so it's 32-27. It would have been 35-27. I hate to, keep beating a dead horse, but, those points were really big, and the defense did a really nice job of, sort of closing things out and giving the team every chance to win, but the offense just, they didn't have anything else left.
Yeah, you mentioned it, Kevin. Oklahoma State went on one of my favorite drive charts. The 13-play, 6-minute field goal drive. You got to love it. You just got to love it. So at that point, like you said, it's 32-27. Again, the Kansas defense giving up a 66-yard drive, but they only gave away 3 points. So Kansas still up at that point. And then this was probably the drive that I think was the one where the game hinged the most on it, is Kansas up 5. And they get the ball back, and you are driving, right? Jason Bean, another pass to Trevor Wilson for 20-plus yards. Jason Bean, a long run on 3rd down. They came in a 3rd and 4, just outside of field goal range near the Oklahoma State 40. And Jason Bean has a run for about 21 yards. And I don't know if you were watching this game on the broadcast, Kevin, but if you go back and rewatch it, it's a hilarious moment because it's 3rd and 4. Jason Bean runs down the right sideline for a first down. and they have one of those. They have one of their parabolic mic guys right there on the sideline with like pick up the mic, and you can very, very clearly hear Jason Bean turn and like to the crowd because it's at Boone Stadium. The crowd's right there. The mic picks it up this day of Jason Bean turning and going, "First down, bitch!" Like right into the mic, and it's like, dude, hell yeah, Jason Bean, let's go, baby, come on, go score. So they get into the red zone at that point, and you're feeling good. But then kind of some disaster strikes. Jason Bean, probably his first bad pass of the game.
Bad pass, but really bad decision. Like in terms of the pass wasn't there. I realize you want to give your guy a chance to make a play. Kendall Daniels is a 6'4" defensive back, so you weren't going to float that over the top of him. And Jason Bean's first interception, but like you were saying, it couldn't have come at a worse time because you're in field goal range, and I don't want to say you're guaranteed to get a field goal given how extra points were going and all of that. But at the same time, if you were, it was second down, you still had another down to fight. Let's just say nobody else got open. If nobody else gets open, you can throw that thing into the stands and still have a third and 9 a chance to pick it up. You'd probably feel pretty good about your chances the way those third downs have been going for you. And, worst case scenario, you're kicking a field goal for the chance to add 3 more points. You should get points in that situation. Instead, there's 3 more points off the board. Now we're talking about 6 points that Kansas has kind of taken off the board through various stuff.
Well, and it's kind of a play where the ball's on the far hash, and Trevor Wilson is running basically a deep corner sort of towards the near pylon. And kind of like you said, it's a play where, with a perfectly placed ball that's thrown sort of way over the top and perfectly in front of Trevor Wilson, it maybe works, but it was going to be a very, very difficult throw regardless. And then on top of that, Jason Bean sort of pretty badly underthrows it, and it's kind of an easy interception right at the goal line for Oklahoma State. That sort of kills that drive for Kansas. And that, like you said, takes away the chance, not only at 7, but also at 3, had Kansas been able to try to score there. And then Oklahoma State, they do it again, Kevin. They do it again. A 10-play, 74-yard, 6-minute field goal drive. Just injected into my veins. It's awesome. They go down. Ollie Gordon has a bunch of runs. He has a couple of long runs. They get it all the way down inside the 5. And they have to run out the field goal unit to kick a 21-yard field goal. So just the saddest field goal. Mike Gundy, what are we doing, man? Just go for it. Good. You're running up and down the field on these boys. You're not even trying to score a touchdown. So, listen, from Kansas' perspective, they take it. They take it and run to the bank because this is now 3 drives where Oklahoma State has moved the ball 50-plus yards. 50-plus yards down the field, and they've only gotten 9 points out of it, 3 field goals. So Kansas is able to maintain their lead at that point. It's 32-30. Kansas gets the ball back, and again, really the interceptions seem to deflate Jason Bean on the pass to Trevor Wilson, and that continued on the next drive. As on a 3rd and 9, Jason Bean tries to throw a pass over the middle. It gets tipped, deflected, and intercepted. Oklahoma State gets the ball back in plus territory, down 2, and you're thinking, oh boy, the wheel is starting to fall off this wagon here as Oklahoma State gets the ball back and is in great position to take the lead with a field goal even at this point. But listen, Kansas holds. And actually, Oklahoma State goes down. Kenny Logan on a 3rd down in the red zone would have had a pick 6, Kevin. Actually, would have had a pick 6. Kenny Logan, and I failed to mention, earlier in the game, Kobe Bryant had dropped a pick 6. I forgot to mention that. Earlier in the game, Kobe Bryant had dropped what certainly would have been an interception, maybe pick 6. This one was Kenny Logan literally might have had a pick 6 off of Alan Bowman. It gets dropped, and Oklahoma State maintains possession, but they miss a field goal. They miss a 43-yard field goal. So KU maintains the lead. It's sort of a sigh of relief. At this point, you're into the 4th quarter. There's about 10 minutes left. So if you're Kansas, you mentioned it at this point, Kansas hadn't scored since the opening drive of the 3rd quarter. You only need one good drive here to try to put this game away. And this is maybe where the lack of Jalen Daniels is felt the most, right? Because I think in a situation like this, you would say, I have full confidence Jalen Daniels is going to go and, at the very least, burn a lot of time off the clock, move the ball, flip the field, whatever, maybe even go score, because you have a chance to maybe put this game on ice. If you score a touchdown and convert the extra point, which I understand had been a big issue in this game, it would have put you up 9, and you would have been up by 2 possessions with probably around 5 minutes to go. And unfortunately for Kansas, it just didn't happen for them. Ultimately, they decided to go for it on a 4th down. And this is probably the play that I think most people will remember most from this game is Kansas up to, it's a 4th and 5 at near midfield in Oklahoma State territory. And Lance Leipold decides to keep his offense on the field. They decided to go for it. It's a 4th and 5. And what appears to be a clear jump from Oklahoma State is not called, and it results in a sack. Jason Bean fumbles. It's recovered by Bryce Gibble, but it doesn't matter. It's a 4th down. Oklahoma State takes over anyways, and this is the play that I think will jump to the forefront of most KU fans' minds about this game, because it's a 4th and 5, and if you go back and watch it yourself, it seems pretty clear that there was an offsides, an early jump by Oklahoma State, but it doesn't get called, and Oklahoma State gets the ball back.
Yeah, and the play before, you call a run play for Daniel Highshaw. One of the linemen doesn't quite scrape and pick up the linebacker, and so Highshaw gets tackled for a 1-yard loss. So you could have been in a position to kind of run that ball at 4th and 2, or maybe you even pick up the 1st down if that block happens. It doesn't. The thing, I went back and watched, and I know I've talked to Oklahoma State fans who have said that Colin Oliver was not offsides. It's important to remember that the camera is not directly over the line of scrimmage, and so you can't look down it and say, okay, well, he was obviously on because the camera says he was on. Here's the amazing thing. The line of scrimmage was at the 40, right? When the shotgun snap hits Bean's hand, and obviously that's not when the play starts. It starts when the ball snapped. But to let you know how quick Oliver was off the ball, when the snap hits Bean's hand, so when he first makes contact with it, Oliver is 3 yards into the backfield already. There is not a single other Oklahoma State player who is across the line of scrimmage. None of them are across the line that's right in front of them, inches in front of them. None of them are across it. And Colin Oliver is 3 yards deep. So, he got, he was either offsides or it was the single greatest jump in the history of mankind in terms of timing that thing. Kansas, a lot of people didn't look at what else happened. Kansas ran like a pick play up at the top of the screen, and it looked like they would have had an opening. That doesn't mean Bean makes the pass, but it looks like they probably would have had something there. Bean wasn't sacked pretty much the second he touched the ball, Tecmo Super Bowl style. But no, it was a huge play, and the defense up to that point had really been bowing up. It's funny. The Oklahoma State got that 1st and goal at the 3, right? Ollie Gordon's 4 carries after that. He had a 2-yard loss, Kenny Logan. He got stuffed up the middle after a 1-yard gain. Then on the next drive, his first 2 carries went for 0 and for a 2-yard gain. So you had basically stuffed him on 4 straight plays. You had your defense put you in that position where if you have that drive, you win the game. That's the drive to win the game. Instead, it comes down to kind of a controversial play. Whatever, it goes down in the books as a sack, as a fumble that Bryce Cable picks up and is not able to do anything with. Oklahoma State has the ball at that point. I think most of us kind of felt like, hey, this is it. And here's where those points come into play too, because Oklahoma State's able to go down the field, get a touchdown, and it would have been they wound up going for 2 after scoring the touchdown. They didn't get it, so it was 32 to 36. But if KU had gotten those 6 points, you're talking 38 to 37. Or I guess
it would have gone for 2 to tie.
For 2 and not gotten it. It would have been 38 to 36, and you would have been in a spot where now all of a sudden you've got the ball in a position to try and run out the clock with 2.5 minutes left. Instead, you've got the ball, you're down 4 points, and the game it's just a wholly different situation.
One other quick note on that play, the offsides call that wasn't called or whatever you may think, is I think the outcome of that play gets all the attention because of the, offsides, no call basically. But I mean, just going back to that play, it's 4th and 5 at the 40. You had just outlined that KU had really been stopping Ollie Gordon and had kind of been able to stop the Oklahoma offense a little bit. You're at the Oklahoma State 40. I mean, do you think maybe KU should have considered punting there? It's a 4th and 5. You could have potentially pinned Oklahoma State deep and made them go the length of the field. Ultimately, KU decides to go for it. And again, I think that's so interesting because to me, the outcome of that play really overshadows the thought process of even going for it to begin with.
Sure, yeah, and that's a fair point. If you punt it, that's a really long way to go.
I'm not saying they should have punted. I mean, I like.
No, it's a fair point to make though, and it's for a team that wants to go out and run the ball. Making them go 90 yards and have to execute those 12, 15 play drives. Oklahoma State had shown it could do that. But that's still a lot of pressure to have to execute play after play after play after play if you're able to pin them at, say, the 10 or something like that. So it is a fair question. I do think at that point, I think I probably would have gone for it. I think yes, the offense had struggled over the previous few minutes, but I think you feel like, hey, we can run this pick play, and get it. And I think that, had Colin Oliver not made an otherworldly play that may not have been within the bounds of, of the rule, had he not made that play and Kansas converts, that could have been the game right there. Kansas might have gone down, scored a touchdown, wasted some time while doing so, and you might have left Stillwater with a win. And so, I didn't have a problem going with it. I thought the play call was actually a good play call because I think that sometimes gets maybe doesn't get panned enough. People say, oh, it was a bad decision to go for it, when in reality it was the right decision to go for it, but it was the wrong play call or whatever else. And so, I thought they did everything they could, and it was, Colin Oliver's a heck of a player, and he made a heck of a play.
Well, the reason I bring that up, Kevin, about the possibility of punting is because what that allowed Oklahoma State to do, if you look at their drive turn on the touchdown, it was a 9-play drive. They ran the ball 8 times.
Yep.
And if they have to do that from their own 10, they would have not have been able to do that with only about, basically 5 minutes left in the game at that point, or 4 minutes left in the game. They would not have been able to just sit there and repeatedly run the ball over and over and over again. There would have been pressure on them to throw it. So that's kind of the reason why I pointed out, is because then you look at what ended up happening, which was Oklahoma State was able to just literally pound Ollie Gordon, and eventually they brought in their backup, who also had a couple nice runs on the drive that allowed them to go down and score. And then it was Brendan Presley who actually scored on an end-around play for them to make it 36-32. They don't get the 2-point conversion. Kansas sort of has one final chance with about 2.5 minutes left. And again, they get stopped on 4th down. Oklahoma State gets the ball at around the Kansas 35-yard line. They end up kicking a field goal with like 20 seconds left. They burn some more time, and Kansas unable to do anything with it after that to end the game. So 39-32. And yeah, this one definitely left a bitter taste in your mouth. And something I want to circle back to that you had kind of danced around earlier in the show when talking about it is, I think it's easy to look back on this game with the narrative of, oh my gosh, the offense played so well. If the defense could have gotten one stop, Kansas would have won, right? Like, it's easy to look back and that be the overarching narrative. But you had mentioned it. Kansas didn't score for the last 26 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
So if you're just box score watching, kind of looking back, it's, oh my gosh, Jason Mead threw for 400 yards, 5 touchdowns. The offense was absolutely rolling. If the defense makes one stop, Kansas wins. well, that's not really exactly how the game played out, right? I mean, it was really more of just a flurry of activity from the Kansas offense in the middle of the game in the late first half and into the second half, and then they weren't able to do anything at the end to really put them over the top, right? I mean, it's easy to look back and say, well, Oklahoma State outgained KU, like the defense needed to make one play. I mean, we've been kind of walking you through it throughout this episode. The defense made the plays when it mattered, right? They forced Oklahoma State into multiple field goal attempts on multiple long drives, and in the end, it was really the Kansas offense that kind of ran out of steam in the second half and couldn't put together one drive that maybe might have pushed them over the edge to win the game.
Yeah, and Oklahoma State, they got 23 of their points in like a 12-minute period, basically. The first 6 minutes of the first quarter and the final 6 minutes or so of the game. So when you look at that, the stretches between, I'm not saying the defense was perfect, but I feel like overall over the course of the game, the defense did enough for them to win. And the defense really did a great job of holding Oklahoma State to field goals when they were able to get inside the red zone. And so it was one of those things where you looked at it. I hate the expression empty calories a little bit, because obviously Kansas doesn't take a lead if Jason Bean isn't playing like that. But when people talked about the difference between Jalen Daniels and Jason Bean at that point, I think the general feeling was, hey, if you have a West Virginia situation, if you have a situation like the end of the game against Arkansas, if you have a close game like against Duke or whatever else, Jalen Daniels is going to lead you on that drive. We've talked about the BYU game. We talked about the Nevada game, games where Kansas kind of had to execute in those situations, and Jalen Daniels got them points in those situations. At this point, you look at the box score, and it looks like a terrific game for Jason Bean, and for the most part it was. But then that not putting up any points over the final, 26-13, I think it was, it did feel a little bit like empty calories, where it was, okay, but where was he when you absolutely had to have it? And you look at the Texas game, which was the loss there, when Jason, KU hung around in that game, and they had a couple drives where you said, okay, KU needs to get something here if this is going to be a game, and they didn't get something in those situations. We talked about how brutal that was for Jason Bean to have to start and plan that game on such short notice, all the different things along with that. But I'm just talking about like what the narrative was, I feel like, about Jason Bean at that point. And fairly or unfairly, that was what it was. Heading into the next game, I think I felt like this might have been it for Jason Bean. I've said this before. Some of the stuff I had heard was, hey, Jalen's going to have a chance to come back after the bye week. I think even the staff was unsure with Jalen Daniels' back injury. How long is he going to be out? Is he going to just feel good one day? Is he not? How's that going to work out? But personally, I kind of felt like it's the bye week. It's the perfect chance to kind of give everybody a chance to rest up, to give him a chance to get healthy and everything. And so this was maybe the last that we would see of Jason Bean in these situations over the course of this year. And obviously that wasn't the way that it worked out. And great for Jason Bean in that, the narrative that I just talked about, that's not the narrative on Jason Bean that we have now. And that's all going to start with that Oklahoma game as well.
Yeah, and I think that's why this game in the moment felt particularly devastating as a loss for Kansas, because of how they played, because of how Jason Bean played, but furthermore, because of the fact that if you win this game in Stillwater, you have the bye week, like you mentioned, for Oklahoma, and you could be looking at talking yourself into, hey, Kansas could make a run to the Big 12 title, right? You're going to stay at home later in the season. At this point, like you mentioned, you're thinking, hey, if you beat Oklahoma State and then all of a sudden you get the bye week and Jalen Daniels is back for Oklahoma, you beat Oklahoma, you get K-State at home, you could be looking at trying to make a run to set up a rematch with Texas in the Big 12 title game. Instead, that dream sort of gets wiped off a little bit with this loss to Oklahoma State. And obviously, we've touched on it throughout the show, but the special teams as well was very, very disappointing in a game like this as well for Kansas. So, yeah, I don't know. I will say this. This was really the first time in a while where I walked out of the stadium. I was at the game. I walked out of the stadium and I was angry. I was legitimately angry. And there had not been very many times over the course of the last, decade plus, where you could leave a KU game, a game that KU lost, and be angry about it. Normally it was just sad, dejected, they just lost 60-10. They just lost 70-3. They just lost 55-3, whatever it might have been. So it was, in a weird way, it was almost nice to feel angry, to be like, man, KU really did go into a hostile road environment and was probably the better team for the most part and didn't get the win. And I am angry about that. And in a weird way, as I was feeling that anger, I was like, wait a minute, this is pretty cool. Like, I'm pissed off that KU lost, and I haven't ever really felt this before. So I don't know. That was just kind of how I was feeling immediately after, was like this sense of this anger, but also this sense of like, wow, this is actually pretty cool. I'm like mad, and like KU like was right there. They almost won a game where so many times before you would be turning it off or walking out of the stadium in the second quarter because they would have been down by 3 or 4 scores already.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, and not to bring up the dark ages, but, you would go on a show and people would say, how many Big 12 games is KU going to win this year? And you might say, I think they can get one, and they would say, which game is it? And you couldn't give them an answer. And the answer wasn't because it was because the game that KU was going to have a chance to win was going to be more reliant on the opponent than it was on KU. It was going to be more reliant on TCU or somebody playing their D game and just not showing up that day. And that was going to be the chance that you would potentially have. But it wasn't necessarily like you could look at the 9th best team in the Big 12 and be like, well, KU is better than this team, or they're going to beat this team. And so, kind of to your point, looking at it, and this certainly happened during 2022 as well, games that you would lose like that, where you're just kind of like, God, it was right there. And you would look at it and say, Kansas is actually capable of beating people, as opposed to, kind of slipping into a win when the other team is, taking a smoke break type of deal. And so with Oklahoma State in this instance too, I think beating K-State, beating Kansas, I think the K-State game, you kind of felt like, well, is this a fluke or isn't it? They still weren't that far removed from the South Alabama game.
Yeah.
But I think you were also looking at it as this was a game maybe where the winner was kind of setting themselves up with a really good shot to beat Texas in that conference title game. And, for Kansas to lose a game that was right there, that they had every chance to win, that Oklahoma State, quite frankly, gave them every chance to win, with a lot of stuff too, because it wasn't like when Kansas stopped scoring in the 26-13 that Oklahoma State made it up like that. There was a long period in there where KU had multiple chances to kind of leave a mark and didn't. With all that being said, Oklahoma State did use that to go on and wind up reaching the Big 12 title game. And, it's one of those things that Kansas is probably going to have a game like this at some point this year. It's obviously not going to be Oklahoma State because Kansas does not play Oklahoma State this year. But whether they're able to pull out a game like this or not could determine whether or not Kansas reaches the Big 12 title game yet again this year.
Yeah, so a real gut punch of a loss at this point for KU in last season. They dropped to 5-2, now 2 losses in the conference. But they do have a bye week to sort of try to, forget about that one and move on to Oklahoma. But 5-2 is KU after a loss, 39-32 against Oklahoma State. Kevin and I are going to be back later this week talking all things Big 12 Media Days as they are kicking off this week. Kansas will be at the podium on Wednesday morning, so be sure to keep an eye out on the KCSN feed on YouTube and also your podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts on KCSN. Keep an eye out on that on Wednesday for our reaction, analysis, and breakdown of all things KU football as Big 12 Media Days are kicking off this week. And, of course, we'll be continuing our Jayhawk Rewind series as well as we get closer and closer to the start of the 2024 season. I don't know about you, Kevin, but sometimes Big 12 Media Days to me is like the sign. It's like time to perk up. Be like, all right, it's showtime. So excited about that, and we'll be talking about that later on this week.
It makes you want to run through a wall, right? And sometimes for coaches that you don't even expect. Like I always remember feeling that way after hearing like Paul Rhodes talk for Iowa State. You're like, that is a football dude. Like I am ready to go out and, it's football season now. So it's always a great milestone in the offseason.
Well, and honestly, it should be even more fun this year because you're going to get to hear from some new faces, right?
Sure.
And guys like Kyle Whittingham from Utah, the new coach from Arizona, from San Jose State. So should be really exciting. So we'll be talking all about that. And of course, talking KU as well later on this week and our reaction to Big 12 Media Days. So keep an eye out for that. But until then, we're going to talk to you soon. He's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. We will talk to you again later this week. Until then, see ya.